Hey everyone, welcome back to the Down and Dirty series. This is FrSkyStve, and today we're going to be talking about setting up trims and subtrims. Subtrims is something we don't really super cover in this episode, other than when you're setting up your plane. Sometimes you can't mechanically set it up perfectly, so you use your subtrims to get that last little bit of up and down to make sure that the control surfaces are lined up perfectly before you go out for your maiden flight. But let's talk about trims. So we're going to go into model, and what you'll find is that there's a trim menu here, and I'm going to close all these up, and we're going to talk about why you need trims in the first place. So I used to think trims were something like I would take my plane out, or it was new, and I'd get one of my buddies to take it up, and he'd trim it, and it would be like, okay, he's an expert, and he trimmed the plane, and it flies great. I'm never going to touch trims again. The reality is trims are transitory. They change day to day, and you should use your trims frequently and easily. There's not really a magic number when it comes to trims, other than what I've noticed is that if you start putting your trims so far down that you can, like making sounds that only dogs can hear, then you're getting very close to the full range of the trim, then you are probably have your control surface set up wrong. So you need to go back and look at that. Essentially what you're supposed to do is when you go out and you get your plane flying, the first flight of the day, you take it up and you get it flying level. You let go of the sticks for a second. If it rolls to the right, you got to give your aileron some little bit of left stick trim, push to the left so that it no longer rolls to the right. And if it drops, you give it at 40% throttle, you give it some up elevator so it doesn't drop anymore. So the idea is that you just want to be able to take your hands off the sticks and the plane flies straight and level. So, and then of course yaw is a little bit more difficult to figure out, but the rudder, typically you don't usually play with that super much, but I have found that it's kind of difficult because sometimes people keep trying to figure out how to fix it with their elevator and, well, I'm sorry, with their ailerons, when in reality is a little bit of yaw trim. I find it's best to sometimes just play with a little bit, give a trim here, tick one direction or another, and just see if that improves things. Otherwise, you can set it back to center pretty easily. And there's voice call outs to let you know. So that's kind of the magic of trims, and essentially let's go through really quick and show you all the different things. We're going to look at the elevator trim, and you can see the range is 25%. Now, as I mentioned, if you are hitting this 25% range, that's 25% of the total throw. And if you're using this much trim, something is drastically wrong, and you need to fix it. It's usually mechanical trim that needs to be fixed. And there's steps involved. It's set up by fine. I believe fine is about 1% each time you press the trim button. If that is not enough for you, you might want to go to coarse, and that will give you a lot more trim. And each time you press this trim button, and again, this is personal preference. There is the easy mode is the one we're going to use. The only thing I'm going to talk about, these two are very powerful, but these are more advanced. But the off one is one where if you're setting up a model as a trainer, I would encourage you, as you're setting the trainer up, you should turn off your trims so that the students don't accidentally move the trims around and not let you know. So that's just a little piece of advice there. Okay, so with that in mind, let's say that you have, now, setting up planes is one thing. When you have foam planes, I find that foam planes, typically they can have the control surfaces change simply by storing them and moving them around. They tend to be something that kind of change a lot, especially week by week. And so what I would say is that don't be surprised if you have to trim your foam planes quite often. It's not really that big of an issue. But let's just say that you have a trim set up and you just say that, hey, this works great. And let's say your elevator was completely, let's say week by week, it pretty much is right on. You set it once and you don't really have to touch the elevator anymore. What you can do is you can move that trim to subtrim just by clicking that button down there. And what that will do is it will set the trim back to 0, and your subtrim was now going to be however many percentage it was set on the trim. So if it was 4, 5, 6%, I will move that down to the subtrim. Again, if you get really big numbers that are kind of scary, I would go back and play with your control surfaces and fix them that way mechanically. But otherwise, you can move trim to subtrim. Okay, and the other thing I'm going to show you is that if you go down to this thing called FrSkyStve, and so what I did is when you look at, here, let me show you on an actual hardware. So go to hardware check. So there is your trims are going to be one here and one here and one here and one here. And what happens is the one on this side are easier to get to. The ones on this side, you're working the stick if you're flying mode 2. So this is ailerons and elevator, right? And it's hard to sit there and let go of, here you can see the trims right there. It's hard to let go of this and move this around. But if you were to move it over here, this is your throttle trim. And let's just say for elevators, you're not really super you don't care if you're flying something like a electric plane. You're probably not going to be adjusting your throttle trim at all. What you'll do is we can change it so that this also controls this as well. And I'm also going to talk about switch C in a minute here. Switch C is located right there. So we can get back out of here, and we're going to go back and talk about cross trims all the way at the bottom here. So what I did is I wanted to elevator, I moved trim elevator is trim elevator. But when I stick throttle, I also did for, excuse me, I also moved to elevator as well. So that's how I did it. You just change this here. If I can change rudder to trim rudder, but if I wanted to, I can also change it so that it is the one that goes left and right. So that is ailerons. So what I have essentially here is I've moved the trims that were normally next to the right stick now over to the left stick. And maybe at some point I want to go back and trim the rudder. So when I'm done trimming the plane after the first flight, I might want to move this back to rudder, back to rudder. And maybe it's not such a, if it's an electric plane, maybe it's not such an emergency to switch this back, but you can go switch that back to throttle if you feel like afterwards. So that's something to do. Of course, we're going to go all the way down here one more time. And this is the one thing that people get so crazy about that it's almost emotional about it. This is something that came out in Ethos 1.5, and it's a feature that people just simply love. It's called instant trims. So what happens is, let's say, again, we're going to take the plane up, we're going to get that flying level. Let's say you're holding the sticks a little bit this way, both sticks that way, and the plane's flying level. Let's say that you have your SC switch and you have an SC neutral. And then when you get it flying perfect, you flip it to SC up, and let go of your sticks, and all of a sudden your trims are completely set now, right? And you don't have to worry about it anymore. You just enjoy the rest of the flight. That's called an instant trim. What you can do is you can go back, and the trims are completely set up. And again, the trims tabs will still work if you need to do fine tuning. So this is a very powerful way to get the trims set up quickly. However, what I would say is this is a mixed blessing, because if you don't pay attention to this, you set it up and you forget about it, and you're out flying around one day and you've, in a turn or whatever, and you accidentally hit this, then all of a sudden your trims are going to be reset to something that is going to be miserable to fly. So you might want to use this for your first flight and then turn it off completely after your first flight if you like to use instant trims. Me personally, I never use it even though I know it's there, and it's simply because I like to look at each control surface one at a time and trim them independently as I fly. But that's just me, and some people just love that, so that's why we have it. And that should do it for the episode. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned for the next episode.